if you think of any product, it starts off with like an ideation. You buy the parts, you manufacture the parts, you assemble the parts, you package the parts, you sell the parts, and the product has success to the customer. Now, sales and success is the end. But so often we as engineers, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, regardless of their kind of background, they will focus on the product and not the end. So we call this begin with the end in mind. And it's also hand in hand with often your biggest strength is your biggest weakness.
Welcome builders to How Would You Build It? The podcast that dives deep into the dynamic world of startups and product creation right here in South Africa and Africa. This show is more than just interviews. Every week we sit down with the brilliant minds to provide a masterclass for building digital products amidst the challenges and opportunities unique to our continent. From seasoned founders to dynamic product managers, we uncover the unique stories and strategies behind some of the most innovative digital products being built. So for all the aspiring founders and product builders out there, you'll discover that each episode is a wealth of practical wisdom and local and actionable insights. Make sure to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to our podcasts and connect with us on social media for even more content. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome builders to another episode of How Would You Build It? It's episode 70. And I don't know, we're on a streak here. I've got another return guest, Matthew. Nice to have you. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, Shania. It's great to be here. And how's it to all your listeners? Yeah, doing very well. Thanks, Bobby.
Cool. Renier, how are you doing? Also, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. I've been invited back quite a few times now, so it looks like I'm saying the right things.
You barred yourself back in here. No, it's great. I'm looking forward to this. As I mentioned, had Matthew back in the day. Very different audience, much bigger audience. And today we're going to dive into Lessonspace and look at it from a different perspective with Renier, more of that founder journey and stuff like that. So really excited. Matthew's got lots of stories for us. But I think first and foremost, Matthew, like we always like to do here, is to start with an elevator pitch. Tell us about Lessonspace. What is it that you guys are trying to do?
Yeah, I look forward to talking about Lessonspace today, but I think for so much, I'd love to focus on, the journey we took and all the things on the way there. Lessonspace, very simply, is Zoom for education. As I joked to you while trying to join this call, not great at Zoom. I hope it doesn't crash or anything as it has done in the past for me, but it's Zoom for education. We work with tutoring companies around the world, South Africa included, obviously, to offer a white labeled SaaS solution where they can teach online lessons. So it's got a whiteboard, text editors, graphing tools, all these things that you might kind of want to use in a learning space. Yeah.
I like I love it. I think about it like Miro. It's the Miro for teaching. Yeah. You've got that whiteboard, but it's got the call facility so you can actually interact with this tutor can actually interact with the students. And then you've got all these templates and all these kind of designs and functionality to run a lesson, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hey there, coffee lovers and crypto explorers. Are you looking for the perfect brew to start your day and fuel those crypto discussions? Well, let me introduce you to Crypto Coffee. Their medium roast Arabica beans offer a taste that's out of this world. It's the ideal blend to wake you up and keep you going through all your crypto adventures. Plus, Crypto Coffee makes a fantastic gift for that friend who can't stop talking about the latest blockchain trends and needs a little extra energy to keep the conversation going. So why not grab a bag today and enjoy a cup that's as rich and as exciting as your crypto journey. Crypto Coffee, where every sip feels your passion for crypto.
And Matthew, what I find so interesting about it, because I mean, the first time I saw Lessonspace, the first thing that comes to mind is like, wow, how big is this tutor space? But as I dove into it, it's massive, right? And it's evergreen. You constantly have kids and people studying that need mentoring and help and tutoring. So how big is that space, and maybe a bit about like how you discovered it and how you got into it?
Yeah, I think answering those two together, it's a good question, Renier. I think we actually were a tutoring company in South Africa called SkillUp years ago, a decade ago. We started that, or we started thinking about that at least. And we were trying to grow this business. We were engineers, and we thought, well, if we want to conduct online lessons, we're now talking 2017, so pre-COVID, we were trying to use some off-the-shelf software to conduct that lesson. And then our tutors just kept reverting to Skype at the time. Zoom wasn't even really a big thing.
Oh man, Skype.
Yeah, I remember that. And we actually started kind of telling the developers who had built this software, like, why is this not working? And we started kind of retrofitting it and solving all their bugs. So kind of just thought, if you're a South African tutor and you want to tutor somebody in rural South Africa or on sort of farm or in another city, to have a way to do that online. Again, this seems obvious now. Back then, it wasn't very obvious. We started building our own software for our own company, SkillUp. And we triggered a Google alert. It was one of the luckiest things. After about 6 months of having this tool working with Lessonspace, we made an announcement to say to our South African customers, use SkillUp tutors. You can use the Lessonspace to conduct an online lesson. We triggered a Google alert, which is just people around the world who will say, I'm interested in online education and any article that has got a lot of traffic. And we got 3 customers or 3 people emailed us that week and said, can we have your API? And they were all in North America, 2 in America, 1 in Canada. And that weekend, we basically opened up our API for them. And then all of a sudden, we were the South African team. We'd been watching all the Y Combinator videos, but thinking that could never be us. And then all of a sudden, we're like, oh, we could sell in dollars. We can sell a software as monthly recurring revenue.
Let's go.
Way better. And I'm happy to say those 3 customers are still actually our customers today.
Wow.
Amazing.
Really, really going from there. And all our competitors then became our customers, if you like. And, we exited out of SkillUp, so it allowed us to really expand there.
And I love that, Matthew, because it's kind of like solving your own problem is probably one of the best reasons to start a startup, right? So, I mean, one of the reasons why I started the open letter is forever I'm like, no one's writing the kind of stuff I want to read about South African startups.
Nice.
So I'm like, let me go solve that problem myself. So, I mean, how valuable do you think it is to actually solve something for yourself and build? How valuable was it for you to be able to build that product which actually solved the problem you had in your business?
Yeah, I honestly think it's like it's probably one of the single most important things in kind of getting started, to know your customer. And even with that information, you can still get it wrong. What I mean by that is, we thought we knew who our customer was. Even when we started SkillUp Tutors, we were tutors. We wanted it to be cheaper. Even when we were in Lessonspace, we needed a tool. So we knew who our customer was. We were the customer. And then, we started other businesses, CodeforKids. I was teaching my niece to code. All these tools started from that perspective. But even then, we still made the problem of not knowing our customers well enough, which I can talk about more, because I think the core you're trying to solve is like, do you really understand who your customer is? And do you really understand what their pain points are and what they need to solve it? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are naturally builders, and you want to build something. So your solution, you always lean towards, I'm going to build something for my customer. And I think so many cases, that's actually not what's often needed. Maybe it's something much more simple than you think you need to build. And it had a huge advantage to us to be able to be our first customer. Definitely. Yeah.
So Bobby and I have been having beef the last few weeks. Like I say that user interviews aren't that useful, and Bobby is telling me that I know nothing about product.
I'm gonna get someone on the podcast. We're gonna settle this once and for all.
Yeah, I would say that.
So Matthew, I mean, speaking about understanding your customers, like, what is the balance between interviewing, sensing, observing, intuition, or how did that play out for you, and still do to this day?
Isn't there the David test, if I remember correctly?
The Mike test.
Mike test.
Yeah, that's a good memory. I'll share that, because I think that does kind of lead into exactly the answer to your question, Erin. Yeah, I mean, I will disagree. I think user interviews, call it what you want, but kind of anything under the umbrella of speaking to your customers is probably the single most important thing. Whether it's you are the customer, that makes it much easier, or if you're not.
No, Bobby, hold on. Don't celebrate yet. I agree with speaking to customers. I don't agree that user interviews are that useful.
I see. Yeah, so we had something, we were a group of founder engineers, and we started building this product. And this was now SkillUp Tutors, 2016, when we were trying to launch it, even earlier. And we asked my younger brother to be the first person to use the tool. And it had taken like north of 6 months to code this thing. And he sat there at the table, and it was 6 p.m. in my room, in Cape Town. And he's a nature conservationist. So it's embarrassing how little he knows how to use a computer. And he just started using it and breaking things, and he wasn't reading anything. He was just clicking buttons. And me and my co-founder, Andrew, were like, what are you doing? This is like, you're totally missing it here. And then we quickly realized something very obvious, that Mike is our customer and he is our end user. And I think we actually created a value from this called begin with the end in mind. And it is still today the central, most important value in our company. And you'll hear everyone in the team come across it at least once a day. And what it means is that we were, well, if you think of any product, it starts off with like an ideation. You buy the parts, you manufacture the parts, you assemble the parts, you package the parts, you sell the parts, and the product has success to the customer. Now, sales and success is the end. But so often we as engineers, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, regardless of their kind of background, they will focus on the product and not the end. So we call this begin with the end in mind. And it's also hand in hand with often your biggest strength is your biggest weakness. So our biggest strength was that we could write code. It also resulted in being our biggest weakness in that we never actually thought there were solutions that weren't code solutions. So we had this thing that developed called the mic test, where every other feature we launched, it went through Mikey and he would like give us feedback. Eventually we started thinking like that and thinking like our customers. And, we that night deleted, honestly, almost half of our code base. And we launched the business 2 a.m. that morning outside in the Steers in Claremont. And if you've been at Steers in Claremont at 2 a.m, it's not many people who are trying to sit on a laptop. We just needed some food. And it has a level of success get up. It allowed us to get to where it is today. And none of that would have happened if it wasn't for Mike. And none of it we could have saved ourselves 6 months of time if we had just started thinking like that at the beginning, whether we interviewed with him or watched him use it or knew better what it was that a parent was going to do on the platform, or somebody maybe wasn't thinking, technically as we were trying to. We over-engineered, long and short. So that's potentially where Mike counted to, speak with the customer, maybe not necessarily interviews, but really, really understand what the customer wants.
Yeah, observing, and I think you make a good point, like putting something in their hands and going, let's see what you do with this.
Yeah.
I just found sometimes when actually preparing these interview questions, you just get answers that lead you in directions that actually are likely not the right way to go. So, but yeah, absolutely agree. Like putting it in their hands and seeing how to interact with it is absolute gold. And I love the point actually, Matt, that you make about like your strength is your weakness, because developers love to hide in code. Product people love to hide in product. Salespeople love to network and not necessarily, get some of the other stuff done. So it's definitely something to be aware of as a founder. It's like, just be aware that you're going to default to where you're comfortable. And in order to make a business work, you're going to have to get uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly right. And like, we saw this happen, and my advice to anyone in the South African market trying to sell B2C, which was our first business, is hellishly difficult. And the reason it was so difficult was we kind of had this Excel spreadsheet and we just sort of thought, oh, well, this is, the acquisition. This is how much money we make per lesson. Let's just scroll that 60 months to the right. And it works because you got to get so comfortable with, your Excel or whatever it is. And you get lost in that. You start thinking, oh, this is all going to make sense. But what we should have done is kind of quickly back of envelope looked at this and said, this is going to be really difficult. We'll try and prove if we can do it. Yet we spent, 5 years trying to get our cost per acquisition, lifetime value perfect, or at least to break even, and those kind of things are like obvious things that because we got so sucked into, the percentages or the Excel document makes sense. It was something we were spending our time doing the wrong thing. We should have been questioning the bigger things sooner. And the more obvious things like, does this actually make sense to get these kind of numbers? And step back from it, not saying, oh, well, we could just look, it matters if we get these numbers and we're going to expand it overseas. Then we're going to have these 7 things we're going to add to it that customers are going to allow. But that doesn't happen inevitably. We weren't like honest enough with ourselves about those things.
But isn't that just part of the journey though, right? Because they say things like just start. And they say that because you need to start learning as soon as possible. And I feel like that's just part of the journey. And then you kind of stumbled across some of the most important principles about building product, which is put it in front of some users and get them using it and understand how they would use it and then start iterating. You kind of stumbled across that. So, yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely, and you're quite right, Bobby, you don't want to fit into kind of analysis paralysis. And I think that's maybe where if step 1 is like understand your customer, understand your weaknesses, understand your strengths. Step 2 is like surround yourself with people who think differently. I can talk to my 2 co-founders originally. brilliant engineers, hyper aware of the risks, hyper aware of like what won't work. And I lean far to the side of like, well, let's just do it anyway. And the balance that the three of us were able to kind of play off one another was extremely helpful, because a lot of the times they kind of had to sit me down and go like, right, Matt, this is now no longer working. We need to do this. And a lot of the times it would never have got started if it wasn't for me kind of kicking it down the road. So again, I think it comes to your strengths and weaknesses, and I would highly recommend just starting. You know, I think that is the best way, but I think being really honest with yourself is like, what are you trying to do here very early on? And like, is that actually a realistic kind of go-to-market strategy you have ultimately? Yeah.
So B2C, Matt, I mean, this is the second podcast in a row where someone says like B2C is horrible, and pivoting to a B2B2C or a B2B is a better play. Like, when was that point where you realized? You mentioned, you looked at the sheet and you go, hey, this is going to work. But I mean, she's acquiring customers in B2C space is unbelievably complicated. Often really expensive because of the gatekeepers of eyeballs online, i.e. Google, Meta, TikTok, LinkedIn. They really make it hard for you or expensive for you to get those customers. And obviously also market size, like sitting in the southern point of Africa, like, I mean, conversion is really small. Like, you look at the freemium model, you need 1 million users to get that 0.5% conversion that could potentially make the product work. And there simply aren't 1 million customers in South Africa. So what was your experience with B2C? When did you realize it's not going to work, and what are you doing now?
Yeah. Great question, really. I think what I'll do is I'll answer kind of two things there. The first is kind of our real experiences in trying to get the B2C to work in South Africa. And then I will touch on why it didn't and what we try and do now. And this is maybe also a lot to do with, it's quite education specific. So we had tutors in South Africa, and our theory was, or our thesis, we raised some capital and we said, let's take these South African tutors who are high quality and low cost relative to an international tutor, and let's sell these tutors overseas online on this virtual environment. So the theory was, people are going to see a low cost tutor at a high quality, and we're going to make our arbitrage money there. Exactly right. And we made this first error where we kind of looked at that, and it took, at the start, it was taking 9 months for our cost per acquisition lifetime value to break even. So it meant for every $1 or dollar we spent, we only got that back after 9 months. It was,
and that doesn't work when the academic year is roughly 9 months, and so you still have dropouts.
Exactly right. And you're like, if you start even like glance at the value of money, the time value, it's like a terrible business.
It's never.
And that was like the best we got it, right? And internationally, right? So what we learned there is something very obvious. We learned that in hindsight, that in education, low cost looks like low quality. And this became a double-edged sword where we couldn't differentiate ourselves by being the cheapest. There wasn't a unique selling point, and we weren't making any money. So in education, we see people succeed when it's high cost. And why this leads into your question of like, why B2B now? It comes down to a really simple model that we use. And it says, what is the income statement of your customer or of our customer? I'll give a very practical example. We sell CodeforKids. We sell it to schools. And it's a piece of software that schools use. So we originally went to schools and we said, would you buy our software? And the school says, we do not buy software. We do, that's not something we buy. So we said to the school, okay, would you buy our digital online textbook? And the school went, oh, we have a line item in our budget for textbooks. So all we as CodeforKids are doing, it's $10 per student per year, or 200 Rand or 100 Rand per student per year. So all we do is we take a flow of money and we deviate 10% of it or whatever to us. We don't have to create a new line item. Lessonspace in a similar way, Zoom, you pay Zoom $19 a month or whatever it is. Zoom pays money for having meetings. This costs them bandwidth or this server rendering. So what we did is we flipped that around and we said, well, why don't we only charge our customers, when we are paying bandwidth and lesson space, or when they are having a lesson. So a customer only pays us when they are having a lesson, when they're earning money. So on that income statement, we are a line item under cost of goods sold. For every $20 you earn, you pay us 50 cents or whatever it is. Now, if you think of a C market in South Africa. Now, you tell me how many parents you think are budgeting in their mind every month a tutor. It's very few. They're not, it's a grudge spend. It's not something they want to spend. It's not like, but what does the average income statement of a South African look like? And you talk about total addressable market. So, that's two big questions. The average income of a South African income statement, if you like, it's like mostly food, housing, insurance, maybe transport, education. And that would be schooling, maybe. So if you want to get into B2C in South Africa, you're going to have to be selling like insurance, transport, housing,
the necessities,
food and beverages.
absolutes,
It's difficult. It's really difficult. And so we scrutinize like, what is the income statement of our customer? And that's kind of where it comes back to for us. And that's why we focus B2B, because it's far easier to see and deviate money from a business to a business than is from an individual.
But I also love that, Matt, because I think a lot of people miss this in their sales process. They're like, why am I not selling? But I like how you guys actually looked at the other side from a buyer's perspective and thinking like, well, how does the budgeting cycle work? What do their financials look like? And I've heard so many success stories of businesses where they said, the customer couldn't buy software or develop software, but they were happy to license software. Or they couldn't buy hardware, but they're happy to rent hardware. It's just such a subtle twist in how you do the business.
Yep.
And then it works. So, how did you go about understanding that from a school perspective? Was it something you knew, or was it something that you discovered through engaging with school and maybe school parent bodies, or how did that happen?
You know what? It was actually a mistake in a sense. We just kind of said to the schools, we had the software but we called it the textbook for coding. And then one school asked us for an ISBN number, which is a number that a textbook has.
Yeah, the book number. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we were like, oh, that's so interesting. They genuinely believe we're a textbook and they are genuinely putting us in their textbook budget. And, as we've expanded CodeforKids internationally, more schools are more comfortable with not putting coding, with buying software. So that's kind of changed a little bit, but it still comes down to where's the budget going? And that's how you that's the best way to solve pricing and kind of go to market, to start with the end in mind, and that's sales or success. And like, what is that person spending that money for? And what do they expect that money? If you can start with that and understand, like, so when you're your own customer, where does your money go? Or when you work at a business, where does the business's money go? Or when you look at industries, where does the industry's money go? And what do they want with that money? If you can figure that out, I think everything else kind of needs to come second. Yeah.
So what I've loved about our current podcasts that we've been having is we're now out of COVID. When we first spoke, Matt, we were in the middle of COVID and everyone was moving to an online space, education, everything was moving online.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know now, since then, we kind of moved out of it. What was the impact? How did your view on customers and all these lessons that you just spoke about, how has that evolved in the last couple of years post-COVID? How has your customer profile changed?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think if I had to summarize it, we had this chaos at the beginning of COVID where, CodeforKids just fell off a cliff. No one could pay for it. Lessonspace was very fortunate to be on the total other side where we had this huge rush of customers. And then there was this kind of drawback where smaller ticket customers left. But then we saw kind of a year later, the bigger customers who were making strategic decisions to work with us started coming on board. And that momentum has kept up, honestly, more than ever at the moment. However, one thing it has made me much more aware of is the kind of, and maybe this comes back to the budgeting kind of comment, is the macro kind of economics of how money is flowing into the education system or into the tutoring system. So, obviously our customers are paying us, but I have much more attuned to how our customers are earning money now. So I'm thinking a lot more about, my customers' and are they growing? How are they growing? Where are they getting new business? And that's been a really fun part of it because, we can work with our customers to help them grow. I talked about our number one value was begin with the end in mind. And number 3 value is make people make money, which is kind of quite a clinical thing. But if begin with the end in mind is how we think about business. We actually have a second one called stab in the front, pat in the back. It's the opposite of stabbing in the back. And that's how we think about the team. But make people make money is how we think about our customers. And we kind of go to the point and say, if our customers can come to us, we can say, we can make you money. If that is true, there's like no reason they shouldn't work with you. We even had a listed company come to us and we could look at their public income statement and be like, well, that's what you're spending and that's what you can spend. So it's kind of, you don't really do a sale then. You kind of just say, well, do you want to make that money or not? Or save that money in this case. So I think I've been a lot more aware of like how it really is flowing right at the kind of grassroots of where that money originates, whether it's government or parents or I suppose those are the two big maybe schools, but that big like government or parents.
Yeah. No, what I love, it reminds me of a talk I listened to years ago that changed my mind on these things. Or it's Jeff Gothelf. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he spoke about these, being more outcome driven. And in your version of this, the outcome is making your user make more money. And so in that whole agile and product principles, it's your definition of done moves. It's not just that we shipped it, but it's actually now what is the end result on the customers that you're serving. And it just shifts that a bit further down the value chain. You really start understanding when you're doing the right things and then because you start seeing those right needles move. So yeah.
I heard a great podcast the other day that said, Kodak thought they were in the business of making cameras, not in photography. And I think in a similar sense, we are trying to be in the business of helping companies grow their tutoring business. It happens to be through our online virtual classroom. With the amount of technology change that is happening, we're just kind of staying abreast as much as we can, but we will quickly kill something and throw it out if it's no longer working or adding value to customers. It's not our technology, like as much as I'm so proud of our technology and the way we built a business around like South African talent and sold it internationally, but it's not the technology that is the value of our company. It's a unique selling point and how quickly we can move and the talent we can create, but it's that asset, the people in the business and what they can create is actually the value, not just what currently exists. So to your point, we don't sell just a tool. We're trying to sell a way for a person to grow a business. There was a great Get Smarter, the education business in South Africa, who exited to 2U that was selling online courses like MIT and Harvard. Their value proposition was, or their purpose was, we make people stand out from the crowd, which I think is extremely powerful because it's not we give you, we're not giving you an education. We're making you can put a certificate on your back wall that you've earned that's been hard to get, and you're going to stand out from the crowd because of it. It's powerful. Those kind of, if you get those kind of one-page strategic plans right, they'll kind of dictate everything you do.
Yeah, and also it's actually captured in their name as well. Get Smarter. It's literally what it is. Another South African example is We Buy Cars. Like they flipped it around. The problem they're solving isn't buying a car. The problem they're solving is people want to sell cars and get cash quickly and get good money for that. So just name the company We Buy Cars. It's not We Sell Cars. It's like We Buy Cars. So it's genius how that actually plays in. Matthew, I want to talk about pricing. Like, you mentioned something interesting earlier. Like, one can often start out a bit cheap, or too cheap, and then the ratios just don't make sense. And I agree with that, and I think this concept of 10x is easier than 2x, holds true, even though it feels really scary, right? So, and the principle for those who don't know, so if you go for 10x more pricey or bigger, you play in a smaller pool because not a lot of people are going after those customers, and the incremental extra effort you have to put to serve those customers isn't five times as difficult. It's often just a 10% increase in effort that could lead to substantially higher margins. Has that been your experience as well? I mean, you mentioned something along those lines, and then what advice do you have for early stage founders to go, just be bold in your pricing, go for higher value and more premium product?
Yeah, it seems like the fate of any first-time founder is to undercharge. And I'll tell you a story with that skill-up tutors I was discussing, where we were battling, we were looking like the cheapest, and we weren't making any uniques. It wasn't unique. This experiment we did, I don't want to say it was like the biggest experiment, but I think it would hold true if we had done it on a larger scale. We literally doubled our costs. to our customer. And we saw an absolutely zero influence that had on conversions. So we were getting the exact same amount of customers converting. And I think, look, that's not for everything. Again, like education, I think value is closely linked to cost. When it comes to pricing, it's not a there's no silver bullet with it. But I do think that the second you put out a price, you are indicating to the world how much one should value your and what it is you're doing. So I think this is a lot more applicable to somebody who's selling something that's very creative to them, whether it be consulting or something that is very much them that they are selling. I think when you start to get in the world where you're selling more of a utility, you've got to be more conscious of what that income statement is with the customer. We can't just like increase our prices in a great, huge way. We're constantly trying to like do the opposite, in fact, for our customers. And so pricing is a tough one. I think another advantage of B2B and, advice, I suppose, to any South African entrepreneurs, we did the whole thing where we raised capital and we had a great partner who helped us do that. And we were very fortunate to sell the business and then become completely private business. We had one or two very strategic people with us, but for the most part, we've been fortunate to become a profitable business that is investing in ourselves and growing at the rate that I think we can grow, whether we had someone give us $10 million or not. And I think the pricing, do what you can to break even, do what you can to create the business profit. Like if you got to obviously weigh in like value yourself, you got to weigh in the income statement, you got to weigh in like, what does this business need to function? And you got to be realistic with that, because if you're trying to do something like we did with Skill Up, we were not charging enough. The business was never going to succeed. It couldn't work. You need to create a profitable business, because then when you have a profitable business, and there are rare cases where you should just grow at all costs, but a profitable business, one that you control, buy yourself time. And I think we can be in the market longer than anyone. We can think as long-term as possible because of the fact that we have time on our side. And that comes because we charge for what we feel is valued. And we've had one or two customers come to us and say, your competitor over there is cheaper. And for the most part, we say, well, then go over there. They ain't trying to do 5 things. We're just doing this one thing as well as we can. And, 3 out of 5 times I'm back.
So as a software as a service, I mean, you need to create packages. I mean, everyone's got tiered things like that. How have you kind of managed that? Because they also say that pricing isn't something that you just do once. It's something that you should be iterating on it, just like your product. Have you been doing that? How's your experience of packaging education product in the pricing models?
Yeah, I think it has to begin with the end. So we have, at least at Lessonspace, 6 customer segments. So we know exactly which one of these people exist. And for each one of those people, I have hypothesis of how much money they are earning and how much money they are willing to pay for this tool. But it doesn't, again, like you can do all of that and then someone could be like, well, I'm paying for Zoom anyway. So then the question isn't, are we going to be the same as Zoom or more expensive than Zoom? And maybe it's, okay, well, it's going to be more expensive, but we're going to do this. So where the value creation is no longer on the audio video, but it's maybe on the whiteboard, the content, the oversight, the data insights, or whatever it is you get. Or it has to be the same price and then not have all those features. And we need to make sure it still works. So there's a lot of kind of packaging the products and the pricing, but I think it has to stem on what your ideal customer is willing to pay. At Code4Kids, we are extremely affordable. We are, 100 Rand, 200 Rand per student per year. For some schools, that's almost laughable and they think we're too cheap. But for some schools, we're too expensive. So, what I might suggest in something like that is don't necessarily make your pricing public. The second you can get on the call, understand who your customer is, what is it that they are, do they fit into a bucket and say, you know what, for you, we actually have a much more affordable solution. It does all these things. Or for you, you're on the top end, you're going to get all the glitz and glam, and that's what you're going to pay because that's maybe what you're used to paying. So that can be one way of kind of doing that.
Yeah. Because we're so used to going and clicking on the pricing page and it gets all public there for you to decide and compare and do all this stuff. I've even noticed a lot of people are actually starting to, in their footers of their websites, actually saying who you could compare them with.
Yes, that's a good SEO tool as well.
Okay, all right, Joe, interesting. So you're talking about, you've mentioned now 3 brands, companies or businesses.
Yeah.
You mentioned it before we clicked on record about managing or building separate businesses. I think your first thing is don't do that. What?
Yeah, my first advice is just do one thing. Um, one, we had skill up tutors. Then it wasn't working. We kind of didn't know what we were doing. I don't want to make it sound for 1 second that there was like this really well articulated idea of what we were trying to do. We had no idea what we were doing. We just had these kind of fundamental things that we wanted to do differently. So like Lessonspace, I remember we sat in the kitchen essentially, and on our whiteboard wrote international first. So we knew the business had to be an international business from day one, not a South African business trying to go internationally. Code for Kids, I would say I've been challenged a huge amount over the years of we should turn this thing off. But now it's paying off in a big way as we've been able to expand it overseas. So one of the advantages of having two businesses is that it's been amazing to be able to not look at a business in isolation, but look at them relative to one another. So this is working there, this is not working there. Why is that? Let's get those two head of sales to talk together, or head of marketing, or whatever it be, that can have a discussion with each other to understand what's working, what's not working.
So you're not cross-pollinating. You have two separate teams running two separate businesses.
Completely, yeah. I'm kind of would oversee both of them at the moment. Yeah, that's taken a while to do properly, and it's been extremely valuable, because for me as a leader, I feel like I've grown a huge amount I've been forced to not do everything. I've been forced to like step away, and I love to like get my hands dirty. And I still do annoy the team but I've been forced to like make sure people in the company are growing and becoming, I heard a quote, your job as a leader is not to create followers, it's to create leaders. And I resonate with that, because I was doing it wrong. I was trying to, get everyone to do what I said, but you can't do that when you have two businesses that are now real businesses. You got to create leaders. And I'm so proud of the team we have. We have such a high retention rate of team. And I think that's the key of what I've kind of learned. I spend a lot more of my time trying to work with the team than trying to do things myself. And I still fall into the trap. But yeah, the learning's been valuable, but I would always say focus on one thing. And I think one of the big things that's taught us is that if you want to scale a business, it's not about what you add, it's about what you take away. Often I would hear like first-time founders say, I'm doing this, but then it's going to do these 7 things also. And I think, well, those are not silver bullets, but you got to do one thing really, really well. And I think more and more, it's like do one thing really, really well. And to scale, it's actually about what you take away, not what you add. And this is something we, as an example, would see like competitors do. They will do a lot of different things. And I know what it's like to do that. You can't kill the things, because it's like earning you a little bit of money, or there's someone working on it. But like, I can only advise anyone to just to scale, take away, don't add.
Like that. And then tell me, you've spoken a lot about go to market, getting the right customers, understanding their income statements, which I love. Explain, you said you're going international first. The advice for somebody, because we know the market in South Africa is quite limited. A piece of advice for founders that are kind of going into that, okay, we're out there, but we need to grow. What kind of advice about going international can you share with them?
Yeah, I can share advice from the context of what we've learned. And I know it's not true everywhere, but one of the unbelievable things with software is you can serve anyone in the world from anywhere. And like, you cannot underrate how amazing that is. And when we trigger this Google alert and we realized that we could sell overseas, these customers wanted this from us, we thought that is something we have to exclusively essentially do. And we've been very fortunate to grow in South Africa as well, because the South Africans are also using our product, of course. I think it's like 98.7% of our market is overseas. Step one, what we got right was there was a bit of luck. Like, please take everything I've said with like a huge disclaimer of a lot of luck. But so that's maybe step one. Step two is we worked with distribution partners from very, very early on. So we found people who served the same customer as us, but offered a different product. And we were able to sell through them on a revenue share sometimes, or kind of some kind of agreement that made it work for both parties. So we know we were selling to tutoring companies. So we said, well, what other tools do tutoring companies use? So we found all of them, and then we got the list and asked to integrate with those companies, and created these very much 1 + 1 = 3 kind of agreements. What happened at Code for Kids was a lot more difficult, it meant I spent like 3 years going back and forth to America, trying every state under the sun. And it really, none of it worked, like zero, like literally zero to show for it until it was just keep at it. And we found somebody in a state in the US, and now we are getting state contracts. And that makes a huge difference. Like, we can do one school district and it can almost be more than the entire of South African sales. It's like a whole different thing. I could spend just as much time trying to hit on the like Zambia or, although actually I joke, Zambia is actually a really big market for us, but maybe even the UK, it's a really tough market for us because it's such an established market. Like, so quickly learn that in the same product in different markets, you go in different ways. There's no kind of unique way to do it all. If you can work with people who are already doing it, try and work with people who are already doing it. And I think, so just ask, who's your customer? Where's your customer going? Can you make people make money? We said to these integration partners, could we make you money? And then again, it's very much 1 + 1 = 3.
I love it because everyone's got the same market. Make me more money.
Yeah. And the customers want to earn more. So you give them discounts by working together. Your integration partner like that, it sounds like a bit clinical in some way, but remember, like I'm talking about these 3 businesses. There were 3 years before any of those businesses where I was trying to make an impact in education, working in every kind of corner of South Africa, and made not zero, but like close to nothing. Wow. And if you're trying to make impact in education without making money, it's not going to work. I think if you can make money in education, you can make it. You are then making
You
it.
are making impact.
Yeah.
Love that, Matthew. And I think also, something that I thought that's triggered here is, if you can find some of the dominant players in the space where your solution would be a value add or add a lot of, or increase the ability to make money or save money, like what you're saying, I think there's a massive part of the market there. And I think that's maybe some of the success that you guys have is like getting some of the big brands on board and slotting next to them. And as they grow, and one of the reasons they can grow better is because of your tool.
Yeah.
And then you're almost on the wings or on the drift of what they're doing. You grow with them, and obviously, then you've got customers on your customer books that you can speak to other customers about and say, well, we're doing this for them. And then obviously it makes the B2B sales easier. So I think that was a great move to slot in behind those people and really just help them make money.
Yeah. It's a big circle to like really understanding your customers. We did a thing recently in April. We called it the April Awakening. We went through every single paid Lessonspace customer. It took everyone in the team the whole month to go through every single customer and understand who they were, why they were paying for us, how much they were charging their customers, what does their website look like, what country they're in. This huge and this resource that we've managed to build, and understanding who they are and giving that qualitative and quantitative idea of them has really put us in good stead for the next kind of goals that we have at Lessonspace in particular.
I have one last question, Rainier. I don't know if you've got anything else, but
Nope.
Matt, AI. How are you guys using or embracing AI in education? I think the 2 terms go so hand in hand these days.
Yeah, man, if we've been asked this a dozen times, numerous times, even more. And then I think the short answer is AI is an amazing tool. We're using it. You can transcribe a lesson, you can set homework, you can summarize, you can do all the cool things with AI. Where we are better, there's still something that AI, we don't think, I don't want to say can never do, but I don't see it happening, is creating the social contract between 2 people. And what I mean by that is, if you think of like a tutoring system, a tutor and a student meeting, there's a social contract that student is going to be there with their class, and that tutor is going to be there, putting an hour of their time to be there. And I don't see like AI being able to do something like that in an effective way. And I don't want to be a big naysayer. I'm fully prove me wrong here, because then we'll jump at that, and we're building all the infrastructure for AI to plug into to Lessonspace in some really interesting ways. And there's some stuff that's been worked on that I'm absolutely mind blowing of. But it's like, again, come back to the income statement. Like, where does this fit in the income statement? And what I mean by that is like, I could add all these tools. It's going to cost more. Who's paying for that? The students? Is the company taking a bigger cut? Is the school willing to pay for it because it summarizes homework? Maybe, but that might have to be very little. Is it going to be a tutor that tutors you online? I do think that's going to be possible one day. But is the student going to have a social contract with this? With this person? Are they going to sit there and go there at 4 p.m. because AI is sitting there waiting for them and will leave if they're late? It's very unlikely. And I think there's certain things that AI can do and there's certain things it can't. And in education in particular, we'll talk forever on it. Honestly, the most powerful thing AI has done right now for us is make us code way, way faster, way, way more effectively, give our customers way better data oversight, give us way what the customers are using after the lesson to support the tutors, support the oversight of lessons. Unbelievable. Is it changing the end user experience a huge amount? Maybe. Is it going to drastically transform how a student is learning? I would like to believe so. But I think we're betting on teachers because I think you learn from people, not necessarily because of the social contract, not necessarily AI. And it depends at which age. And that's why we focus on the young age where I think learning from a person is critical.
It's a cool thread. Actually, a lot of the people in edtech that we've interviewed have pulled on that as well. So yeah, I can definitely see a thread there. But anyways, we've got to wrap up. And before we do that, there's always the lightning round. Very quickly, Matt, I don't know if I asked you last time around, but let's just say in the last 3 years, what book have you read that anybody should read? Book recommendation.
Well, the first one that jumped to mind is actually very little. Maybe there's a lot to do with business. It's South by Ernest Shackleton. I love an autobiography. And this book, it's shows you when things get really bad and they get really bad, being able to deal with leadership and humor and discipline. It's just such an adventure, that book. And that is one that's I've just loved it. But I know maybe not as business if you like.
No, it's perfect. Some advice, one piece of important advice that you would like to give on to the next founder following your shoes, following your steps.
Yeah, especially to an early stage founder, is scrutinize that, begin with the end in mind. Just understand your strength and your weakness are probably the same thing. And that's a really good thing, but be super aware of it. If you're a strong engineer, don't spend all your time building product. If you're a brilliant accountant, do not spend your time in Excel. If you're a brilliant salesperson, that's great in entrepreneurship. Make sure you can deliver on success. I think just begin with the end in mind. Scrutinize as early as you can what your customer needs. You'll save yourself a bunch of time.
Nice. And then a new thread that we're starting. What founder or builder in the community should we bring onto the podcast to join our community?
I think one of the people I'll mention 2 people I've learned a huge amount from in Cape Town. Rob Paddock, founder of Get Smarter, been a massive advocate and is part of our company. And Carl Westphal, who is recently now on Time Bank, just an unbelievable executor and business acumen. Both of them have been amazing mentors and advisors and rubber ducks that I can bounce things off over the years. Yeah.
Cool. So when I send you, hey, do you mind introducing, eh?
Good luck getting an hour with them. I'm sure they will, but
cool. Renier, last thoughts?
We just have the longest running startup podcast in Africa. Of course they're going to join.
Yeah, they'll be there.
Love it.
All good, Matt. Thanks. It was very interesting.
Thanks, Renier. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Thanks, Matt.